Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Getting and Giving Consent for People with Autism. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event. To the right of your screen is the control panel. As an attendee, you have the option of listening in using your computer or by phone. To switch from computer audio to phone, just select phone call in the audio pane and follow the dial-in instructions. If you're having any trouble hearing me, please send me a message through the questions pane and we will assist you. For today's session, we've shared some materials in the handouts panel, and you can download these materials at any time. And at the end of today's presentation, you will receive a certificate of attendance via email. Since your mic is muted by default, you can submit questions to our presenters by typing them into the questions pane at any time, and we will hold off answering any questions until the end of the presentation. Since most of you are now here, let's go ahead and get started. To those of you who just joined us, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Getting and Giving Consent for People with Autism. My name is Clara and I am your host for today's event. It's great to have you all with us today. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our speaker for today, who is Catherine McLaughlin. Catherine McLaughlin, MD, ASAC certified sexuality educator, is the founder, CEO, and lead trainer for Elevatus Training. As a national expert on sexuality and intellectual and developmental disabilities, she trains professionals and parents, as well as individuals, to become sexual self-advocates and peer sexuality educators. She is the author of the Sexuality Education for People with Developmental Disabilities curriculum and developer of online courses that engage parents, professions, and self-advocates. She has spent her 25-plus year career committed to elevating the status of all people, which is why the name of her growing company is Elevatus Training. Contact her at www.elevatustraining.com, and I will put that information into the chat shortly. So without any further ado, I'll turn the presentation over to Catherine. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here today. We're really going to focus today on this idea of consent. So what is consent, but also how do you accept a no? How do you say no? So there's lots of pieces of consent, and we're going to go through all of those. So let me just change my screen here. So one of the things that I have done in my work is talk to lots of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and many of them refer to themselves as self-advocates, and maybe you do as well. But I went to them to say, you know, people with disabilities don't seem to be receiving sexuality and healthy relationship education. Why do you think people with disabilities need and want to learn about sexuality? And this is what they said. So we can learn to have healthy relationships, so we aren't lonely. So we're able to make informed choices. So not just choices, but we want information so we can make choices that are right for us. So we can pick the right person for the toughest part of the relationship, making it last. So we can be safe in our relationships because we all have desires and needs, and that's okay. So that people know their rights. So we can be sexual self-advocates and not just self-advocates. And many of the self-advocates say that when they ask about getting a job or maybe living on their own, people tend to just say, oh, great, let's figure out how you can, achieve that goal and help you work on it. But when they talk about relationships and sexuality, they often get negative, sort of this awkward silence around this. And many self-advocates say it's difficult for them to speak up around these topics because of the reaction they get from others, like maybe a care provider or parents or family members. And so they say that just makes it more difficult for them to be sexual self-advocates. There are also some self-advocates from Illinois, And this is what they said about sexuality education. I want to know more so I can decide what's right for me, my body, my choice. I didn't receive any information in school or from my provider. I learned by the school of hard knocks. I'm still trying to work through the trauma of learning the hard way. And then the last one, we had classes at the group home in the past, but it's been a long while. I can't remember what I learned. So people are saying, it's my body, it's my choice. I need information so I can make good choices. Also, I'd like to learn by getting information and skills ahead of time rather than learning through negative experiences. And that I want to learn more often than just one time or one class. So that's what a lot of self-advocates are saying around learning about topics. And we're going to talk more about consent. But they also talk about sexual self-advocacy as being speaking up for yourself sexually, getting information, attending a webinar, learning about consent, that's part of being a sexual self-advocate or a relationship self-advocate. It's about taking a stand and saying to whomever, this is my choice. It's also about when you're in relationships, speaking up around your sexual limits and your desires, as well as respecting your partner's limits and desires. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about is just, sort of our own boundaries. And when we say yes or no and respecting those boundaries and starting to do what you want with relationships. So that's what sexual self-advocacy is. And part of that is learning about consent. So like I said, we're going to define what consent means. We're going to explore how to give and get consent. And we're also going to talk about how do we manage our feelings when we don't get consent or someone says no to us. How do we accept it and then take care of ourselves? All right, so just one more thing when we think about being a strong sexual self-advocate, this is how I see it, is individuals with autism or autistics, depending on how you refer to yourself. But part of that is owning your body and knowing that it's your body and you get to decide what happens to it and who touches it, controlling your lives, making your own decisions, being proud of who you are, having dignity, forming positive, healthy relationships, and decreasing abuse as well. So all of these pieces are part of being a strong sexual self-advocate. And one thing that I often talk about is, the thoughts in our head influence or make us act a certain way. So if we think, I'm not in control of my life, I don't get to decide what's right for me, if someone asks us to do something that we don't really want to do, we may not feel like we can say no because we don't believe that it's really our body. So there's lots of pieces that we have to believe in order to be a strong sexual self-advocate. So here's just a few. It's my body, my mind, my life, and I get to decide what's right for me. It's okay to ask questions about sexuality and relationships. Learning about sexuality helps me make healthy decisions in my life. Everyone is a sexual being, including me. And being a sexual being means that you have a sexuality. It doesn't mean that you're having sex. It means you have a sexuality. There's many types of relationships, and I have the right to be in any type of relationship that I choose. And I deserve to be in a healthy relationship. So when we believe these things or we have these thoughts in our head, we're more likely to take care of ourselves. So think about for a minute, do you feel like it's your body and your life and you get to decide what's right for you? And then also think about, do you believe those thoughts? Or do you have difficulty believing them and why? And then what can you do to change that too as a self-advocate? What could you do if you don't think it's okay to ask questions about this? What can you do to change that? Because it is okay and important to ask questions from people that you feel close to and you trust and that are going to give you good information. And if there's any family members or professionals on this webinar, how can you make sure that the people that you care about firmly believe that it's their body and they get to decide what's right for them? Because that's a big piece of consent. If we don't believe that, it doesn't really matter what the definition is. So making sure that you really believe that and those that you're supporting and care about believe that as well. So let's move on to the definition of consent then. Um, so consent, many people will say it means permission or an agreement, right? So somebody asks you something and you say yes or no, and that's giving or not giving consent. But there's also some pieces of this that are important to know. So one is consent is a yes. Some people might say, well, they didn't say no, so that's a yes. But no, we want an actual yes. Yes, I would like to do this, or no, I would not like to do this. So very clear. But also the yes needs to be freely chosen. And I'll explain more about that. And we're going to look at some scenarios and figure out if it's consent or not. And you can put in the chat whether you think it's consent or not. So what we want to ask when we look at the different scenarios is, did the person say yes? And was it freely chosen? And freely chosen is the opposite of this. So freely chosen means that you ask someone anything. Do you want to go to the movies? And they are able to say yes or no, and you're going to accept and respect their answer. But the opposite of consent or freely chosen is lying to get someone to say yes, threatening them. If you don't go to movies with me, if you're not sexual with me, I'm gonna find somebody else or break up with you. So you're sort of threatening to get them to say yes. Pressuring, like constant pressure. The person says no, and you keep pressuring. Again, that's not all right, because you're making somebody say yes. People should be able to make their own decisions, yes or no, without pressure and threats. Or blackmail. You could say, if you don't do this with me, I'm going to tell everyone that you called in sick to work on that day that you weren't even sick, right? So they have a little bit of information and they're going to use it to make you say yes. Intimidating you to make you say yes, bribing you, giving you money, giving you gifts, and saying, since I gave you this, you now need to do that for me. Or force. And forcing someone, when we're talking about sexual relationships, forcing someone to be sexual with you is called rape, and that's illegal. So there's lots of different ways that people can get yeses, but we want to make sure that we don't use those ways, because that's making people say yes. I could hold a gun to your head and make you say yes, but that wouldn't be freely chosen. So we want to ask those two questions. Did the person say yes when they were asked something? And was it freely chosen? So let's look at some scenarios, and I'd love your opinion on these. So is this scenario consent, and why? And is it not consent, and why? So here's one that isn't about sexual relationships. And so consent is something we give all the time. It's not just around sexuality or sexual relationships. So let's say you're going out for pizza with a friend. When it comes time to order, you ask your friend, do you want pepperoni on the pizza? And the friend says, sure, sounds good. So they're saying yes, right? So we want to say, ask the question, did the person say yes? They said sure, which I think of as yes. And was it freely chosen? So did the person just ask the question and not threaten or pressure or intimidate or anything? So what do you all think? And I'd love to, if you could just put in the chat, do you think it's consent? Yes or no? What do you all think?
I'm seeing some responses coming in, and so far everyone is saying yes.
Great. All right. Excellent. So yes, because they said yes, and it was freely chosen. Okay, great. So let's go to the next one. And some of these are tricky. So we'll say one person asked another person if they want to have sexual intercourse. The other person says yes, and they have sex and they enjoy it. Is this consent?
Okay, I'm seeing the responses coming in, and everyone is saying yes again.
Okay, so we got we got the yes, and it's freely chosen. Excuse me. All right, how about this one? One partner says, let's have sex. The other one says, no, I want to talk first. The first one says, if you don't, I'm going to tell everyone you did anyway. The other person says, okay, they say yes, but they feel kind of yucky about it. Is this consent or not? And why?
Okay, the responses I'm seeing is no and no because the partner was threatened.
Exactly, right. So it was not freely chosen. Yes, they did say yes, but they were threatened. Yeah, so then that's not consent. Nice work. Okay. One person sees a person on the street and thinks they're very, very sexy. They go up to them and touch their breasts. Is this consent?
I see responses coming in. I hear someone saying gross and no, no, this is assault. No, this is force.
Yeah, didn't even ask, right? So didn't even get permission or agreement or anything. So that is not consent. And you're right, that is assault to touch somebody's body in that way. Okay, again, here we go again. So you're with a sweetheart, a partner, and you're kissing, and you want more touch. So you go and you move your hand down to their sexual parts or their genitals. They stop your hand and push it away. Is that consent?
I am seeing no, no, a rejection is clearly being made.
Right. Even if they didn't say no, they were pushing away, which was saying no. So it doesn't always have to be verbal. Some people don't speak. So pushing a hand away or putting a hand up is saying no as well. Great. All right. Now, got a few more here. One person starts kissing their partner kisses them back and starts taking off their clothes. Is this consent? What do you all think?
Ooh, I'm seeing some mixed reactions this time. I'm seeing a yes and I'm seeing a no because they didn't ask the other person first.
Yeah.
Mostly no's is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, so it's a little tricky, isn't it? Because we don't really know enough about this. Maybe this is how they are sexual with each other. One starts kissing, the other kisses back, they pick up their clothes. So we don't really know, but sometimes people will say no, like many of you did, because they feel like maybe they kissed the person and the other person kissed back and maybe that's all they wanted. So there wasn't enough is oftentimes what people say with this one. There isn't enough of a request and permission given. Yeah, great job. Okay. And let's say Jim says, let's have sex. And Amanda says, I don't really feel like it. And Jim says, oh, come on, please, 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 I really want to. And Amanda says, I don't really feel like it. Please, Jim says, please, come on, I really want to do it now. Amanda says yes and feels okay about it. What do you think? Is that consent?
I'm seeing a bunch of responses here. No, she's being pressured. She was pushed into it.
Yeah. Any yeses?
I'm not seeing any yeses. No, mostly no, she's being pressured.
Yeah. And I think that's a good, that's the thing. We may pressure people sometimes as well, not really realizing that it makes it not freely chosen by putting that pressure on someone. And so it's good for us to learn to just accept no's, or the person says, I don't really feel like, and go, okay, I understand, right? And then we deal with our own hurt feelings or disappointed feelings. We don't make them fix our feelings. Okay, I think I've got one more here, maybe two. One person says to the other person, I love you and I want to have sex with you. but the person doesn't really love the person. They're just saying that because they want to have sex. The other person says, okay, yes. Is that consent?
I'm seeing no, it's a lie, lies, no.
Yeah. We can't lie to people to get them to do what we want them to do. It's just not fair. We want to be honest with people about what we want to do with them and how we feel about them, because otherwise they're saying yes to something from someone that loves them when they don't really love them. So you're right, lies, so not consent. All right, so some of those were a little trickier, right? But I think what we really want to get good at is asking someone for something or them asking us, and we say yes or no, and we accept it. Doesn't mean we won't have feelings of hurt or sadness or anything when someone says no to us, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But what we want to do is look and see, did the person say yes, and was it freely chosen? And that's consent, those two pieces there. If someone says yes, but it wasn't freely chosen, it's not consent, which is a lot of what you put in for your answers as well. And if someone says no, it absolutely is not consent. All right, so not only, so there's this piece, right? What is consent? And then the next piece is learning to say no. And some people are better at that than others. And so even though I'm not going to be able to hear you, I want you to practice saying no, okay? So you might feel funny if you're sitting at a computer and other people are around you, but just say no, okay? So you're going to practice saying no. And then we're going to talk about what it's like to say no as well. So we're going to do just, I'm going to ask you something and then you just say no. You don't have to tell me why. You can sit straight up, you can look in my direction and just say no. Okay, so you're going to practice this. All right, so here we go. Can you loan me $5? And even though I can't hear you, I hope you're being very assertive and speaking up and saying no. All right, can you loan me your bike? Can I just borrow your bike? And again, no, you're saying no. It's okay to say no to other people. Will you have sex with my brother? Again, it's okay to say no. And then, may I touch you? It'll be our little secret. Again, no. All right, well, hopefully you practiced and you didn't feel too strange practicing even though I couldn't hear you. But we're gonna do, I'm gonna ask you 3 questions that are a poll. So we're gonna get that started and we'll start with the first question. And it's about saying no.
All right, everyone, we have just launched a poll on your screen. And don't worry, you can't see Catherine anymore. She'll be back shortly. Our first question is, do you always say no when you don't want to do something? So go ahead and select your response. And your options are yes, no, and sometimes. So it looks like about 60% of you have responded. For those of you who haven't responded yet, go ahead and submit your responses now, and then we will close the poll in a moment. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close the poll here, and we're going to share the results. And Catherine, you can see them as well. It looks like the majority of people are saying sometimes.
Yeah, right. It was really difficult sometimes to say no to other people. So here we've got 26% said yes, I always say no if I don't want to do something. And 15% said no, I don't always say no. And then there was that mix of sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So let's go to the next one.
All right, here's our next poll. How does it feel when you say no? Your options are great, scary, or powerful. So go ahead and make your response. And someone says, can I pick two answers? And unfortunately, not in this instance, you can't. So pick the one that is probably the most true for you. It looks like we have about 57% of the people have voted. So go ahead and get your response in because we will be shutting this poll down very shortly. Okay, it looks like most people have voted. So I'm going to share the result now. There we go.
All right, so how does it feel when you say no? 22% said great, 33% said scary, 44% said powerful. Yeah, and the person that asked about the two, you can put in the chat, what two did you feel? Because sometimes we can feel great, but we can also feel scared, or we can feel powerful, but also scared. You know, we can have a mix of feelings, which is what you were pointing out as well. But that most people feel powerful when they say no, which is wonderful, because it can feel really good when we say no to something we don't want to do, but also that scary part as well. So I think the last poll will kind of talk about when what makes it difficult.
Okay, and it looks like the person that wanted to answer two were they wanted to say both scary and powerful.
Yeah, just a mix. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the next poll. What makes it hard to say no to others? And our options are they may leave me, I'm scared they will hurt me, and I don't know what will happen. So go ahead and choose the one that you think is best for you and submit your answers in. And I can see that they're coming in.
Great.
Looks like about half of you have your votes in so far. So we'll just give it a couple more seconds here to let everyone have the chance to respond, and then we'll close it out in a moment.
Great.
Okay, so we're gonna now close the poll and we will share the results with you. And that's a pretty powerful result there. A lot of people saying the same thing.
Yeah, so I don't really know what will happen. So it's a little scary, like people said earlier, 33% of you said it's kind of scary because we don't really know what's going to happen. A small percent said I'm scared they'll hurt me, which is scary to hear. And if you're worried about something that's going on right now and you're worried they're going to hurt you, you might want to talk to someone about that. And maybe you just mean they'll be mean to you, but maybe you mean they'll be physically hurtful and that would be abusive. So you might want to talk to someone if you are really scared. And then they may leave me too, right? I mean, the thing is, we care about our relationships. And so it can be really hard to say no because we're worried it'll hurt the relationship in some way or will hurt their feelings. And, that means we're taking care of them more than we're taking care of ourselves. And I think as we grow up and get older, we get better at taking care of ourselves. And when we're younger, we might want to take care of other people more, like, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings, or I feel bad, but then we're taking care of them and we're not taking care of ourselves. All right. Thank you all so much for answering those. That was really helpful to hear what was on people's minds. And we talked about the first two questions on the slide, but what can you do if you keep saying no and the person keeps asking you? Like they ask you out on a date or something and you say no, and then they ask you out another time, no, and another time and another time. What can you do then? If you could put your ideas in the chat, that would help others too, learning about, well, what can I do? Like, is there someone that keeps asking and isn't listening and respecting my boundary or my answer or my no? Anything in the chat?
I'm not seeing anything yet. Oh, one just came in and it is ask for help.
Yeah, yes. And sometimes it's hard to ask for help, right? Just like it's hard to say no. But it's okay to ask for help if someone isn't respecting your boundaries and your no, to get some help. Go to someone you trust, go to a teacher or a family member or a counselor, someone that can help you figure out what to do about this because they're not respecting you. and your no. Yeah, great.
And I'm seeing a
Okay.
response as well that says, try leaving the situation or ask them politely to them to stop. And someone else says, you can block them. And I'm assuming that means like over social media, that sort of thing.
Right, right. Absolutely. So blocking is a boundary. Um, it's saying, no, I don't want to contact any more contact. Please stop asking me. Yeah. So it's sort of a nonverbal way of doing it, but it's creating a boundary, which is a limit. And you're saying no. Yeah. And then the second one, can you remind me what? So there was blocking, and then there was keep talking to them, tell them to stop.
Yes, you can either leave the situation or politely ask them to stop.
Yep. Yeah, and you can also, if someone is not stopping, you can also sort of like blocking, you you can say, you can leave, which might not feel polite, or you can say, stop this no more, and be very forceful and not as polite too. So you can say, stop, no more. Okay, great. Now let's go to the next piece here. All right, so we talked about saying no and how difficult that can be. And what do you do when someone doesn't listen to your no, doesn't respect your no? And then there's the other part, which is learning how to accept a no from someone else, right? So not only is it about us being able to say no and being respected, but we have to do the same for others as well. So we want to understand how to take no as an answer. So you can speak up and say what you want, but still the other person says no, right? And so has anybody ever asked for something and gotten a no answer? You know, what did you ask for and how did it feel? So if you could put that in the chat, like is there a time when you got a no? Maybe you asked someone out on a date. Maybe you asked someone for their phone number. Maybe you asked someone to be your friend. It doesn't even have to be in sexual romantic relationships. Maybe your parents said, no, you can't go to that dance. How's it feel when someone says no?
Okay, I see someone saying it's disappointing, but we need to learn to graciously receive a no.
Yeah, yes.
And for another one, asking someone on a date and they felt humiliated.
Yeah, right. Kind of embarrassed and yeah, it doesn't feel good, right? Even though we do need to learn to accept it gracefully, um, it can feel yucky. It can feel humiliating, embarrassing, disappointing, all these feelings. Yeah. So it isn't always easy. So here's just a little bit of advice. And it's interesting that you wrote gracefully, because that's what I say too, is how do you accept it gracefully? So this is what I tell people that seems to work pretty well. Um, if you get a no from someone, it's okay to ask for a second thing. And if you get two of those no's, then you need to stop, right? Because let's say you say to someone, do you want to go out on a date and go to the movies? And they say no, because they don't like going to the movies. If you say, do you want to meet me for coffee tomorrow morning? And they say no, then that's it. We need to accept it gracefully. Or you can stop after one no as well. But if you wanted to see, like maybe they actually want to go out with you, but they don't want to go to the movies. So you might try something else, right? And I'll show you some examples where sort of a second option. But once you get those two no's, we have to accept it gracefully. So what does that mean, gracefully? And someone already mentioned it. Someone says no to you and you're disappointed and humiliated and hurt. How do you accept it gracefully? What does that mean? Anything in the chat on what gracefully means?
Not making a fool of yourself or regulating your emotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't blame,
Right.
don't lash out.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's sometimes easier to talk about what is not graceful versus what is. But graceful sounds like, not, or keeping your emotions calm. Yeah, and we're going to watch a video, and we can point out, I'll have you look for how did people accept a no gracefully as well. All right, excellent. So just a couple things here, and I'll make sure we get to the video. So again, you could ask your friend for a ride to buy a pair of running shoes, and they say no. Then you might ask another option, right? So you might say, is there another day that you could give me a ride to get a pair of running shoes? And if they say no again, then we're going to accept it gracefully. So we're going to regulate our emotions. We're not going to lash out or blame like people were saying. We're going to just stay calm and accept, right? So that's another example of just that second option. Or you could say, you asked me to borrow $20 and I say no. And you could say, how about $10? And I say no again, then we're going to accept it gracefully. So it's okay to ask for another option, but we don't want to ask for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 options. We're just, seeing if there's something here that will work. Another example, you go to your boss and you say, I'd like a $2 raise. And they say, no, we don't have it in the budget. You could say, how about a 50-cent raise? No, I'm sorry, we really don't have any extra money to pay you more. You've got your 2 no's. It's time to move on. Another one, I kind of already did this one. Will you go to the movies with me? And they say no, and then you could say, would you like to do something else with me? Like maybe go have coffee or go for a walk in the park, or you get a second no, we're going to move on. Accept it gracefully. All right, so we're going to watch this video, and what I want you to think about when you're watching it is, what does this show you about consent? What did you see around freely chosen and saying no, accepting a no, all the pieces we've talked about. So let's watch this, and you can, while we watch it, you can think about, okay, what is this? Where did you see these skills we've talked about today? All right, so let's talk about these questions. When you saw the video, it's got some nice music and it's going through the different generations. What did you see in this video regarding consent and what we've talked about? Did you see consent, not consent? What did you see? What did you notice? You can put your ideas in the chat.
Okay, consent is everything.
Mm.
They gave a variety of verbally asking consent.
Mm-hmm.
None of it was forced.
Mm-hmm.
Someone noticed some declining gracefully,
Mm-hmm.
and people accepting a no. And someone said consent isn't just for sex stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And specific and accurate ways to accept or deny is what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It just, that video just really shows you ask, and then whatever you get, your understanding about it. That they really model that accepting a no, saying no sometimes. Some of them might be like, and they say, it doesn't seem like you're into it. So that's the other thing. If you're asking someone to do something and they don't say yes right away, and they're kind of, you can say, you know what, let's do it another time when you're more interested, when you feel like you want to or something. It doesn't seem like you're into it. And that's okay to help people say no in a way as well. We want everyone to be able to say no, but if you're sensing a no, it's okay to say, you know what, I can see that you don't really want to do this. Great. Did you see anything around freely chosen? How do we know these things were freely chosen?
Okay,
Anything
just
in the
waiting.
chat? Yeah, is there anything around, did you notice anything with that, freely chosen?
No bribing just came in,
Mm-hmm, right. No
or
sad
convincing.
face.
Mm-hmm.
What was that?
Or
Sorry.
convincing.
Convincing, right. Yeah, yeah. No, like sad face, oh, you hurt my feeling, they just, okay, right? So part of that is being comfortable with who you are too, because being rejected or someone saying no to us can hurt, and having to be, being okay with it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're not wonderful, or it just means they're saying no, and that's their limit right then, and you're okay just the way you are too. Both of those things are true. So I think we have one more question, a poll question for you all to talk about, well, what do you do when you do feel rejected?
Okay, so here's our final poll. What do you do, or what do you say to yourself when someone says no to you? And your options are yell at them, threaten to leave them, and accept their no and take care of yourself if you are hurt are your options. So go ahead and make your selection. And it looks like about half of you have responded so far. For those of you who haven't responded yet, go ahead and submit your responses now, and we will close the poll in a moment. Okay, we're now closing the poll, and we'll share the results with everyone. Oh, look, that was unanimous here.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So wonderful. You don't yell at them or threaten them, right? It's freely chosen, and you accept their no, and then you take care of yourself if you're hurt. So what do you do to take care of yourself? Anybody have any ideas? You can put them in the chat, because it helps everyone to hear from other people about what they do when they feel hurt. What can you say to yourself? What can you do that helps you take care of your hurt feelings?
I'm seeing use positive self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to someone you trust.
Yeah.
Do a favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
Take a deep breath.
Great.
Journal about how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And listen to empowering music.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. So think for yourself too. What makes me feel better when I'm hurt or disappointed or humiliated, or what do I need? What makes me feel powerful or happier, or pick yourself up, kind of a thing. So think about what you do and what makes you feel better too. So let's go. We've got one more video which is about dealing with rejection from others. It's kind of an animated, cartoony thing. But let's watch this and see what you take from that for dealing with rejection. All right. So just to talk a little bit about that quick clip we did on dealing with rejection, what did you learn from watching that? What's something you can take away from watching that, like to remember if you ever feel rejected again? And you can put those ideas in the chat as well. What do you want to take with you and remember from the quick video we watched?
Rejection doesn't mean there is something wrong with you.
Yeah, that's a really powerful one and good for all of us to remember.
And remember, rejection happens to everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Yeah, right.
And someone
And
else said the video has some good ways to handle rejection.
great. Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes it is nice to just know that, it does happen. We're not alone. All of us have been rejected at different points in our lives. There's nothing wrong with us, nothing wrong with us. And there's lots of healthy ways to take care of ourselves and not force other people to take care of us, but take care of ourselves. And I think that's a big part of growing up too, is being able to take care of ourselves. So I wondered if people have any questions for me in the next few minutes, and then we'll wrap things up. But I also put my email address on this slide in case people want to reach out with questions or ideas about resources. So if there's any questions, you can put them either in the question section or the chat, and I'm happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you so much, Catherine. So that concludes the presentation, and we're going to begin the Q&A. And just as a reminder, you can still submit your questions to the questions pane in your control panel. Because our time is limited, we may not be able to get through all of your questions. And if there are any questions that we don't get to today, we will try to get back to you by email. So our first question is from Brian, and he wants to know, what about malicious rejection? And he's speaking from personal experience and trauma.
Mm, right. So someone that's really, it's not just they're asserting a boundary or saying, no, I'm not interested in that. It feels mean to you. It feels like they're intentionally wanting to hurt you. Um, we can't control other people, right? We can only control ourselves. So I think my question to you is, do you want this person in your life? If that's what it feels like they're doing to you. We don't know. I mean, they could just be, we don't really know if it's malicious or not. But I think it sounds to me like you're saying they're doing it to really hurt me. So I ask, do you want to create a boundary so that this person can't hurt you anymore? So that's what I would ask you. And I'm not sure what you think about that. And have you tried that? And
Perfect. Thank you so much. Our next question is from Emily, and the question is, what do you do if you're autistic and your nonverbal communications and verbal communications don't always match up? So there are mixed signals.
ah, yeah, great question. Well, I think part of that, well, that can be confusing, right? For people, if you're saying one thing and your body's saying another thing. And so people might not quite understand what you're trying to say. And I think really talking, maybe saying that, saying, even though my face is all scrunched up, I really do want to do this. It's just, it's just how I'm answering it. So maybe saying more about it, that difference, like about what you really want. I don't know how come your body language is not matching what you're saying, and are there ways that you can change that? And if not, to explain that to the person so that at least you're giving a clear verbal message when your nonverbals are unclear or seem different. Let me know if you have a follow-up from that or if that helps at all. But I think sometimes people with autism are misunderstood by their body language, and so being clear and explaining that. I think about the situation where people, when we make eye contact, we know that people are listening to us. And that's kind of a societal rule we have, and that can be very difficult for someone with autism. And so you may not be looking at them, although you are really listening to them. And I think in that case, people with autism do different things. They either really try to practice with eye contact, so they're letting the person know, or they look in their direction, or they tell them, I have trouble with eye contact, but I am listening. I absolutely am listening to you. So that's sort of an example of, there's some choices you can make when your body language isn't matching or what we would expect your body language to do, and explaining that. Any other
Perfect.
questions?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, but it is getting close to wrap up time. But we did have some people saying it was a really interactive and fun webinar, and they thank you for that. So that's wonderful to hear. All
Can,
right,
can, I, can I ask one more question?
sure.
Um, and so what I wanted to end with was just what's one thing that you can do to become a strong sexual self-advocate? So after this webinar, or just in general, what's one thing you can do to become a strong sexual self-advocate? And if people want to put things in there, and then we can wrap things up.
Okay, I'm seeing listening, learning that my voice matters and it's my body. Practicing saying no in non-sexual situations to get more comfortable saying no. and helping students find their voices.
Hmm. Great. Nice. All right. Well, and those of you that are here and didn't write anything, just think about what can I do to become a strong sexual self-advocate. And I'm so glad you were all here. And I don't know if, Clara, you have to do some wrapping up.
I do. So thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you everyone for joining us today. If you found today's event helpful, we encourage you to register for OAR's next webinar event, Friendship Development for Autistic Youth, Lessons from the UCLA Peers Clinic, which is on April the 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Once you close out of today's event, you'll receive an exit survey, and we would appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. Everyone will receive a follow-up email with a link to today's video recording and materials within the week. So on behalf of the Organization for Autism Research, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.